Holy City Center Radio, it is episode 321, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Friday, December 6th, 2024. It's the weekend, and if you need plans, you know what to do. Go to holycitycenter.com/calendar to find out what is going on around Charleston this weekend and beyond. It's the best place to find plans when you're searching for them, and there's always something that unexpected that you'll find on that list that turns out to be something that you really enjoy doing or becomes a new weekly favorite for you, so be sure to check it out. Got a couple stories to update you on here in the Charleston area, but first, a quick update. Not a lot going on here. Again, haven't been, doing anything new or exciting since I've gotten back from my trip. But I did figure, what the heck, I'll tell you this embarrassing story, especially for those who know me, whether friends or maybe acquaintances, people I've worked with. If you do somehow see me out in the wild, and wondering what happened to my face. So that sounds dramatic, and it's not that big of a deal. But so if you see me currently, I have a cut near my nose, just under one of my eyes, and the cut and a little bit to the, as you look to the, if you're looking at my face to the right, you can see some bruising. Technically, I think it's a black eye, but that sounds dramatic when I think about black eyes, but I think that's what it is. But again, it's not as dramatic as, if you've seen people who have black eyes, like say someone who played baseball and took a ball to the face, that kind of, it's nothing even remotely close to this. This is the most basic injury that you could call a black eye ever, but it is noticeable. And a couple people have asked, and hey, what happened to your face? And I've sent a picture of it to some friends and family, and they all said, "Oh, that looks painful." And yeah, it was. So to make it the whole classic adding insult to injury, it is one of the dumbest injuries I've ever given myself. So I don't sleep well. I don't think I've ever talked about that on this podcast. I have several issues that I don't do a very good job of sleeping as much as I love it. I often wake up, especially early in the night, for any variety of reasons. I can't sleep. And, so some of those nights I get up and, I'll try to do something, maybe read, maybe flip on the TV, maybe even do a little work. It just kind of depends on how, where exactly I am. If I'm like, man, I'm really tired, I feel like I could fall asleep, I just need to kind of reset myself here. If I'm like, yeah, this isn't happening. So, but oftentimes I'll go grab a snack, just get a little something in my stomach. I know that's not a good thing. You're not supposed to snack at night like that, but whatever. And so I was a little sleepy. I just, couldn't get back to sleep. So I'm a little out of it, but, no excuse for what happened. So I go downstairs, go to my kitchen, open up the refrigerator door and the freezer door. So they're both open. I'm looking around. Now, what did I want? I wanted ice cream. But after I opened the freezer, I thought, look, you're not supposed to be snacking at night anyway. Ice cream's a real bad choice. Maybe there's something a little healthier in my fridge. And so I opened that door, leaving the freezer door open. I'm looking in my fridge. I crouched down to see if what I had on one of the lower shelves and, if I had anything in there. I didn't really see anything that was catching my eye. And I was like, I guess we're going to have to go back and look at that ice cream. And speaking of catching my eye, I popped up from this crouch stance, forgetting about the freezer door being open and where exactly it was in relation to my body. And bam, the side of my face by my nose and eye met the corner of, the bottom corner of the freezer door. It was very painful. I was very annoyed and mad. I'm sure some swears were uttered, and I was very angry about what had occurred. And lo and behold, it's what started as like a cut, nothing bad, just a little bit of blood. Thankfully, sometimes when you get a cut on your face, particularly like your forehead, for whatever reason, those are just areas that bleed a lot more than other places. So thankfully, it wasn't that bad. I didn't really think too much of it besides being annoyed. I woke up, it was painful, and that's when I noticed like some bruising had started. And by I don't know a little bit later that day, the bruise was very well established. So that is my embarrassing and dumb story of how I injured my face and got a again very mild black eye, if you can even call it that. But just thought I'd share that. I'm sure some of you have injured yourselves in dumb ways. Everything from this silly stubbing your toe on something, or whatever, to maybe something more in line with this. So yeah, I feel pretty dumb and embarrassed about it, but that is what happened. I suppose it could have been a lot worse if I was a few inches in another direction, could have smacked my eye directly, and who knows. So thankful it's not worse. And just wish I could come up with a better story to tell people. If I'm just going to tell them the freaking truth and just enjoy that embarrassment. So there we go. So that is my embarrassing story. So without any further delay, we're going to get into the latest news here. But again, I hope you enjoy your weekend, and thank you so much for listening. But let's get into the news. So unfortunately, this first story is very sad. Was very upset to hear this news on Thursday. I think I found out very early in the afternoon. But Charleston, unfortunately, has lost a radio icon, honestly. Mike Edwards, who is better known perhaps as the guy on Two Girls and a Guy, the extremely popular morning show on Mix 95.9. He was also the program director over there. He passed away at some point, perhaps overnight, early morning, so Wednesday into Thursday. The Charleston Radio Group, which oversees a few stations, but that includes the Mix 95.9, they put out an announcement about his passing. Brooke Ryan and Tanya Brown, who are the two girls from Two Girls and a Guy, they also put a very emotional video on Instagram discussing what happened that morning. So apparently he did not show up for work on Thursday morning, and after trying to reach him through different avenues, Brooke and Tanya said that they, called authorities to do a wellness check. And unfortunately, those who arrived at his home found that he was dead. Um, so again, just very, very sad news. I'll get into my personal experience of Mike here in a moment, but some more details. He was just 53 years old. Later in the afternoon, the Charleston County coroner put out a press release saying that he did, in fact, die in his home, which is off of Savannah Highway, and that they are presuming his death to be, quote, a natural death. They said there's no suspicion of foul play, and the final cause of death will be determined in 8 to 10 weeks following the completion of further testing and the finalization of the autopsy report. The coroner said that the Charleston Police Department is the investigating police agency. So this is typical of these types of situations where even though there doesn't appear to be any foul play, there is a death. And so the police are investigating in case something changes with the autopsy report. But it appears at this time it was a natural death. In a statement, the Charleston Radio Group president, Paul O'Malley, said, quote, Mike was an amazing person, beloved by his coworkers, listeners, and our entire organization, and will be truly missed by those fortunate to have crossed his path, end quote. Edwards, whose real name, by the way, was Michael E. Chambers, he used Mike Edwards as his, radio personality name, was him and the show extremely popular. They are multiple award winners, especially with the Charleston City Paper and their annual Best of Awards. The show frequently won Best Morning Show, and he did win Best Local Radio Personality a few times as well. He was known, not just for his appearances on radio and activations when they go out and do things at events or whatever. He was also known as a huge supporter of some local nonprofits, including the Charleston Animal Society and Charleston Pride Week. And he had a long history here. He first came to Charleston as the program director at 95SX all the way back in 1994. 5 years later, in 1999, he joined the Two Girls and a Guy morning show with Brooke and Tanya, who I mentioned before. And after that, they, their three careers, they, even though they had the show together, and it was popular. They ended up going to different markets and different states and things like that before finally coming back in 2014. All three were reunited on Mix 95.9 for the Two Girls and a Guy show, and honestly, it's been super popular ever since that return. As I mentioned, not just the awards, but so many people listened to the show, talked about it. They had great interactions on all three hosts have great interactions on their social media channels. Just really a beloved show, and all three are were highly thought of in the community. So obviously, my thoughts, my prayers, all go towards his family and friends, and my friend Brooke and Tanya, who I can't imagine what they're going through right now. I'm sure the Charleston community as well. There's a lot of people who probably felt they knew him just because they listened to him on the radio every single morning. And so I know it's a tough time for the Charleston community. It was hard for me not to think about my friend Richard Box Schmidt, who's known, as I just said, Box was the nickname. He was a popular morning show host, and he died by suicide in that, and as opposed to a natural death here with Mike. Wow, it's been 5 or 6 years since that happened, I think. But it was hard not to think of him today as well. And like Box, I did have interactions with Mike and appeared on a show. Now, I wasn't as friendly with Mike as I was with Box, which is not to say I disliked him at any. We just never, we didn't like hang out outside of his radio gig, like I did with Box sometimes, and I didn't really see him out and about, at different events and things. But I was on Two Girls and a Guy, I think 2 or 3 times. It may have been more than that. It was pre-pandemic, so I don't really remember how many times they had me on there. And he was always super nice, as Brooke, of course, and Tanya are as well. He was kind, he's nice, he was funny. I think the first time I was on, he pulled me aside afterwards and was asking me questions about Holy City Center. Kind of what was I trying to do with it? Did I have goals? Would I be interested in, like a partnership or selling it, perhaps? Like he just wanted to know what exactly. I was thinking about doing with it because he was kind of interested in seeing if there was something we could do, some sort of partnership with his show or the radio station, or what we could do. And ultimately, we never really reconnected and came up with a plan of any kind of official partnership or anything like that. But he was one of the first people to ever approach me about, hey, would you be interested in maybe some sort of partnership with another entity? And that meant a lot to me too, that he thought what I was doing was good, and he had an interest in something. Again, I don't know what he officially had in mind. He threw out a couple. Hey, would you ever be interested in this and this? I just kind of want to know. Um, and so that meant a lot to me too. That even though nothing really came from that, that he had that interest and appreciated what I had put into Holy City Center. Um, and ultimately I ended up coming back, like I said, and I think if I remember correctly, I might have talked about like I would come on like a Friday and talk about some of the best weekend events. I think they had me stay on for a couple of segments that they were doing on those mornings too, like one of those what would you do in this situation type things. I wish I could remember more, but I just remember having a good time and feeling welcome there. And although it wasn't the first radio show that I'd been on, it was the biggest. This was the show that most people listen to. It's like top rated, if not every year since they've been back, most years, like top rated morning show, as far as like listeners and everything. So I had that tie to it, and although I didn't know him very well, I did very much appreciate how he treated me, and allowing me to be on the show. They didn't have to do that. It's not like they were needing any kind of boost. They didn't need anything from me. They were just nice enough to invite me on, and he was very generous and kind. And he'll certainly be missed by a lot in the Charleston community. So certainly a sad day, and I was very sad to hear the news. And again, I just hope his friends, family, fans, and whoever else is affected by this. I hope they get through it okay. And yeah, Mike will certainly be missed. Hard to go on to another topic, and I thought about having that story be the only one that I talked about today, but I figured I'd put in one more story in here, kind of a quick one. um Something that I think locals and residents probably have noticed, and that is slowly but certainly happening. South Carolina is approaching the point where more than half of the state's residents will have been born elsewhere. We know that people come, especially to Charleston and other coastal areas of South Carolina, and they've been flooding in here. But I don't think we, necessarily realize, wow, that many people in the very near future coming in here could make it that most people in the state weren't even born here. Um, and that's, like I said, it's already happening in most of the coastal counties, but people continue to relocate to South Carolina in general, not just the coast. And it's certainly changing the state's demographics. So, some background: until the 1940s, more than 90% of South Carolina residents were born in the state, and most of the rest were from, say, Georgia or North Carolina. So, it wasn't like from far flung places. Even 30 years later in 1970, it was still about 80% of residents that were natives here in South Carolina. But the decades that follow saw the state's population more than double, and people were moving from the Northeast and Midwest in bigger numbers, and they played a huge role in that demographic change. Last year, South Carolina had the nation's fastest growing population entirely due to people moving from other states. Last year, 2023, an estimated 51.8% of South Carolina residents had been born in the state, obviously down substantially from even not just the 40s and 70s, like I was talking about, but just even a decade earlier when it was 57.8%, according to census records. So basically 60% of the people living in South Carolina were born here in 2012, 13, 14, in that range. And it's almost dropped actually it was 6 percentage points down to 51.8, so nearly 52%. So still the majority, but very quickly it has sunk over the last few decades. If you're curious, the top 5 states that people have recently been coming from when they relocated here were New York, California, North Carolina, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. You may be surprised to hear Ohio is not in that list, since that was the long-running joke about people from Ohio are moving here in great numbers. I know that was the talk when I first moved here in 2007. It was all about Ohio, Ohio. There wasn't really talk about, quote unquote Yankees from the Northeast. That has changed, obviously, and other states as well, as you see California getting in on it with, going cross country to move here. That's pretty incredible to be one of the top 5 states. And yes, obviously North Carolina is on that list. Georgia didn't make the top 5, but a lot of people from Georgia move here too. So they're, just because people, it might not be all South Carolina natives, there's still a good chunk that were born somewhere in the South. So whatever that means culturally. So, if you're curious, at the current rates of in migration from other states, South Carolina could cross the 50% line as early as 2026. So, that's basically a year away as we're approaching 2025. So, in about a year or so, South Carolina could have more people that were not born here as current residents than actual natives, which is shocking to me. You just assume the state's a pretty good size. And although here in Charleston we talk a lot about people moving here, and I am one of them, of course, you just assume everyone's kind of moving to places like Charleston or maybe Hilton Head, and to lesser extent maybe like a Georgetown, like coastal on the water. Um, Again, maybe retirees, etc. But it's not that at all. It's all over the state in all different ages and reasons and things. So I was shocked to hear that. I just assumed the percentages were still very much in the state's favor, again, considering the size of the state. Um, but no, in as little as a year, us non natives could make up the majority of the Palmetto State. That'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Sound System for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And a big thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. If you have a moment, please like, subscribe, rate, review, whatever you can do on the platform you're currently listening to this podcast on. Please do so. It certainly helps me out and gets the podcast out to more people. Speaking of, a couple folks reached out to me with their, Spotify year-end wrap. They have the whole, this is your top artist from the last year, top song, and all sorts of other fun and silly things. If you listen to podcasts on Spotify, they'll also tell you like your top 5 podcasts. And I've had a few people send me screenshots showing Holy City Center somewhere on their top 5 list. So that was really cool. And I greatly appreciate folks who have done that. And if I show up on your Spotify wrap, please show me. That's really cool to see and makes me feel like I'm not just speaking, to no one. When you do a show like this, you don't know who's actually listening because there's no one in front of you. And you can look at download numbers, but that doesn't mean people are actually listening. They may have subscribed and just don't even listen. It's nice to see those things. And that's really cool that people are doing that. And again, thank you for listening. Even if it's not one of your top five, I appreciate any amount of time you spent listening to this podcast here in 2024. I'll be back with you next week. Specifically, we should have our show as normal on Monday. Very much looking forward to it. Enjoy your weekend. But until then, good night and good luck.